And in fact, the only consistent thing he's ever done is the wrong thing. He did the wrong thing in response to the murder of Officer John O'Keefe by charging Karen Reed. And he did the wrong thing when pursuing Aiden Carney for allegedly violating a bogus restraining order and exercising his First Amendment rights. And he covered up for the criminal state troopers who entered into a conspiracy to arrest and jail Carney, simply to shut him up and prevent him from bringing his own misdeeds and the misdeeds of the corrupt troopers like Michael Proctor, Yuri Buchanan, and the puppet master corrupt state police lieutenant Brian Tully. As long as he can protect them, it doesn't matter who else pays the price. These are the people who need to be held accountable for the decisions that they make. And instead, not only aren't they held accountable, but they're not holding anybody else accountable either.
It's unbelievable. For 2 years, 3 years, Turtle Boy, think about it. All of us, these motherfuckers framed Karen Reed. They killed John. There is no question. It is not speculation. It is a fact. They killed him. There is undeniable evidence. It is undeniable.
God save the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is the I Don't Belong Here show, and I am your host, Samantha Beningo. I am a behavioral scientist, a career psychotherapist, a sixth-year PhD candidate in clinical psychology, a master's level psychologist and counselor, and I am here breaking down the Karen Reed case.
These guys were drunk. Fight happened. An oh shit moment happened. They panicked. They didn't know what to do. I believe the owner of the house, right, has a checkered past, right? I said in a live not too long ago, a live stream, John O'Keefe, his bruises had the calling card of Brian Albert. And what did I mean by that? Brian Albert has beaten several Boston cops physically off duty drinking. He was a sergeant of the, and this is where I'm going to end it. He was a sergeant of a high-speed fugitive apprehension unit.
There is so much to say. I'm completely overwhelmed. But I want to focus right now on one detail, one thing that came out this week from the defense and the brilliant, top-notch expert testimony that we heard, in particular from Dr. La Pasada. Now, I've mentioned it in a couple of videos, but I want to make sure and be clear about the implications of a key piece of her testimony and spell out precisely how it is that this piece of information completes a circle, fills in so many of the holes that we've all been scrambling to rack our brains to try to make sense of for the last few years. So let's go back to Dr. La Pasada. Now, if you haven't seen the injuries video that I did of John O'Keefe's injuries, first, I would suggest you should watch it because it is so clear, just even from common sense alone, that the injuries on John O'Keefe did not come from a car accident, simply by both evaluating car accident injury victims and what that looks like, and animal attack victims and what that looks like. You do not need to be a biomechanical engineer or an engineer of any kind to assess that. You don't need to be a medical professional. You just need to use common sense. And it is incredibly clear. But the key piece of information that from the jump misled everyone, anyone trying to figure out what happened to John O'Keefe, which, by the way, the investigators were not doing. So they, barring their efforts, for those of us who absolutely do want to know what really happened to John, one of the details that the medical examiners, both Scortibello and Dr. Stonebridge, who examined John's brain after the initial medical examination, which was quite thorough, there was suppositions or assumptions or inferences that were made both at the scene by the first responders, at the hospital by the people that tried to resuscitate John O'Keefe, and then by the medical examiners in this case, that misled all of us. And because of that, we all were distracted, all led in the wrong direction. And then it became very difficult to understand the consciousness of guilt evidence, which is the general title, umbrella term that I am using to describe butt dials, Google searches, destroying evidence, perjury from Colin Albert. I mean, just that I am using to describe the behavior and things that were said by the entire group in the House, including anyone at the Minion meeting. The Minion meeting is that meeting early morning after the investigators from the Canton Police Office come and do the initial investigation at 34 Fairview. So this is Brian and Nicole Albert, Julie Albert, Brian Higgins, Jennifer McCabe, Matt McCabe, and maybe some of the Albert children. I don't know. The folks that were essentially trying to figure out what they were going to tell the investigators. And that is also the meeting that is really pivotal, because it's when Jen McCabe explains to the group that Karen Reed was pointing out she had a cracked taillight and saying, could I have done this? At that point, Brian Higgins says, you better call back Lank and tell him what you just told us, so that they could begin to frame Karen Reed for this murder. So looking first at what the conclusions that Dr. La Pasada came to, which are so logical, makes so much sense, that just that information alone completely changes the picture. So, and when you go back and you shift the picture, including what Dr. La Pasada says here in just a minute, all of the things that happen after completely make sense. So let me show you exactly what I mean. Let's go back and let's hear from Dr. La Pasada.
With regard to the case that's before us, what injuries did you observe with regard to Mr. O'Keefe's head specifically?
I observed that he had evidence of blunt force trauma to the back of his head.
Are those injuries consistent with a particular type or pattern of patterned injury?
Yes.
Describe that for us, please.
There in the back of his head, a little bit to the right-hand side, was a horizontal tearing of the scalp, and that's called a laceration. And surrounding that were linear scrapes that were vertical in orientation. So that is an injury pattern. And then you have to think, well, what could cause that injury pattern? And so then you go from there.
Did you also, in addition to looking at, by the way, how did you make that assessment about the injury? Was it photographs?
Yes.
Is that a normal way for forensic pathologists to make an assessment? Is that an acceptable methodology to make an assessment of a wound pattern by the use of anatomical photographs?
Oh, absolutely.
Have you done it before?
Oh, hundreds of times.
What is a coup contra coup injury?
Now, it's a very interesting, peculiar injury to the head. When you have a blow to the head, the blow can either be the stationary head and there's a blow to it, or you can have the head that's moving and gets the blow. So looking at a pattern of coup contra coup helps the forensic pathologist differentiate that. A coup contra coup injury examines the coup, which is where the impact occurred, and then we look at what's 180 degrees opposite that impact, and that's called the contra coup, or like opposite the coup. And that injury pattern helps us determine whether a person was just having a fixed head and somebody hit it, or whether the head was just standing and went down to the ground. The coup contra coup of a falling or being pushed backward has injury patterns where the impact occurred, but then there's also injury patterns 180 degrees opposite from that. And that happens because the brain is floating in cerebral spinal fluid, and when the head comes down, the brain is a little bit behind, so you get the bang on the back of the head, but then because the brain is floating, it hits the inside of the opposite side of the head. And so that makes the contra coup pattern, and that tells us that there's been a fall backwards and hitting the head.
Is that consistent, a coup contra, just in general, a coup contra coup injury, consistent with a linear acceleration of the head by a fall, an unbroken fall straight back?
Correct. There's also some angular force in that as well.
Understood. In order to determine whether or not Mr. O'Keefe suffered from a coup contra coup injury, can that be done by a gross examination, or does it have to be surgical?
We would look at, well, first we look at the outside, but then we have to look at injuries to the scalp, and we look at the skull, see where the skull fractures are, and in particular to look at the brain and see where the damage is to the brain. And there should, in a fall backwards, you have damage to the brain at the site of impact, but you also have damage to the brain 180 degrees opposite from that, and that tells you it's a fall backwards.
In the case before us, dealing with John O'Keefe, were you able to look at the scalp and the injuries associated with the scalp from a gross perspective?
Yes.
Were you also able to look at the skull and possible fractures that Mr. O'Keefe suffered on his skull?
Yes.
And what about the brain? Did you have evidence of a dissection such that you could see the brain and determine whether or not there was a coup contra coup injury associated with the brain?
Yes, I had a full examination of the brain available.
Were Mr. O'Keefe's head injuries consistent with a coup contra coup injury?
Yes.
Could you describe that, specifically his head injuries, to the jurors, please?
Well, as we say, he has a pattern head injury on the back of his scalp, where there is a tearing of the scalp, and then vertically above that, there is some little areas of scraping to the skin. So that tells me that Mr. O'Keefe went backwards onto something that had a little ridge, but it also had some irregularity to it to cause the different scrapes before you get to the tearing of the scalp. Then when we look at the skull, he had a massive skull fractures that started in the back of his head. They came around to the front. They went under the base of his brain, under the skull, under the base of the brain, and it came into the front of the skull at the orbital plates and fractured that, and that caused some bleeding in his upper eyelids. When the brain was examined inside the brain, I could see that the brain had become swollen and parts of it had herniated or moved down the area where the spinal cord is, and that's called brainstem herniation, and that is why the brain stops functioning and why your body stops functioning when you have a severe head injury.
Brainstem herniation is seen during compression of the brainstem from above, causing it to slide down into the foramen magnum. The arteries and veins generally get torn, and the result is often fatal due to hemorrhages.
As shown in this cutaway view of the skull, the brain is well protected and has little room for movement or expansion. When the cerebellum begins to swell, the space that it occupies fills rapidly, and cerebellar tissue is pressed into the foramen magnum, constricting the spinal cord.
You indicated that the wound pattern suggested a ridge or ledged surface.
Yes.
Could you explain that in more detail, please?
Yes. So if I were looking at it, I would see the break in the scalp. Then I would see several sort of irregularly placed scrapes of the skin that kind of look like pencil marks. And so that means that something with granularity he hit first, then it moved up a little, broke the scalp, and then moved on a little bit above that.
Would you expect to see that if Mr. O'Keefe had fallen backward onto a perfectly flat surface?
No, it has to be a surface that has some small ridges in it to make those little vertical patterns.
So what does this mean for us, and why is it important? Well, what we learn from the testimony of the defense's investigator who just last week went to 34 Fairview and did some measurements, as well as took photographs of the steps inside the garage where they found blood evidence, is that if you measure from the street, let's say by the mailbox, to the side door or to the garage door, you have approximately a 74 feet distance. Now, according to John's GPS and Apple Health data, he walks about 84 feet, and I think it was 36 steps. And if you consider where Karen Reed might have pulled up, 84 feet would have been almost directly from the car to that side door. The fact that there's evidence of blood on the steps inside the garage is critical, because what we just heard from Dr. La Pasada, steps could clearly correspond with the kind of injury she's talking about. Because consider what she's saying. Imagine that somebody's falling backwards. As you're falling backwards, you might see a scrape or a horizontal pattern, and then where that body lands could very well cause all of the fractures to the skull. So it makes perfect sense that John fell backwards onto steps, and the fact that there's blood evidence on the stairs in the garage, and that garage distance happens to match up perfectly with John's cell phone data, is a pretty big coincidence. But there is so much more. While everybody's been focused on the lack of an accident in Dr. Rentschler and Dr. Wolf's testimonies, which are incredibly helpful, believe me, I see that. But if we are focusing on what happened to John and not whether or not there was an accident, this information from Dr. La Pasada explains everything. Okay, so let's go back to what happens at the scene at 34 Fairview that morning, the morning when they find John's body. Now, first and foremost, when they arrive at the scene, Karen and Carrie Roberts go directly to John's body, while Jen McCabe is directed to make the 911 call. So I was just going to play this 911 call, but because I have all of this new information in my head, when I went to play the 911 call, I heard it completely differently. And I tried to go back and edit it so it made sense, but I couldn't make it work. So now I'm going to analyze the 911 call with an updated understanding of what actually happened on that night. And wait until you see this.
Before the chest compressions, did you make a phone call?
I called 911.
I'd like to move to introduce a copy of that 911 call.
Okay. Do you have something physically to... Thank you.
Miss McLaughlin does.
Thank you.
With,
Thank you.
with the court's permission, I'd like to play Exhibit 45.
Yes.
No, this is for my emergency.
Yes, I need someone to come to 34 Fairview Road in Canton, Mass. There's a man passed out in the snow.
Okay, there's a man passed out in the snow. Now, this is something a lot of people had analyzed over the last couple of years because it sounds weird. Why wouldn't she say there's like a cop down, an officer down? Or why wouldn't she say, my friend that I love is down? Well, it sounds weird, but she says it this way for a very specific reason, and actually a number of them. So first, she refers to him as a man because it's distancing. It puts distance between her and that man. And that's what she needs to do, right? She psychologically and literally wants to distance herself to the dispatcher from the guy who she knows is now dead on the lawn. Now, she also doesn't say he's an officer because the only reason that you would say that is to try to get them to come more quickly, to motivate the cop on the other end of the call into action. But she knows there's no need for that because John O'Keefe is already dead. So in fact, she doesn't want them to get there quickly. Everything inside her body wants no part of this. So she doesn't actually want them to get here quickly. And that's the reason why she doesn't say there's an officer down. That's also the reason why there's no urgency, because she knows he is dead.
You can't hold up, you can't know, okay?
Yeah, I don't know why I did that.
You have to tell us about the line.
I just keep going, you guys got here in 6 feet, okay?
I'm a trip 7, I'm a trip 10.
Okay. I know. Where's the budget? I don't keep going to parents.
911, what's your emergency?
I need someone to come immediately to 34 Fairview Road, Canton, Mass.
What's going on?
There's a guy unresponsive in the snow.
Okay. There's a guy. Again, that's distancing. There's just some guy. I don't know who he is. Unresponsive in the snow. Note that unresponsive is very formal, almost law enforcement like jargon. It's the kind of language that you might expect if I was a law enforcement officer and I show up at the scene, I might radio that in. We have a man unresponsive in the snow. So if I was being advised by, let's say, a first responder and or a law enforcement officer who knew that, might he suggest that what I tell the 911 dispatch officer, that a man distancing is unresponsive in the snow? So this is Jen McCabe's rehearsed statement. And every word is intentional. She doesn't get it all right, but she's trying.
In the south, 34?
Yes, 34, the Albert resident. Yes, I just pulled up and found it.
Okay. I just pulled up and found him. Now, that's a curious thing to say. He didn't ask, how did you end up at the scene? Who are you and why are you there? She offers, I just pulled up and found him, as if to say, I have no idea how he wound up there. I don't know how he got there. Again, that's distancing. I don't know, officer. I just pulled up and found him. In case it's not clear yet, when we talk, or when you heard maybe even Hank Brennan during the trial use the terms consciousness of guilt, that phrase, this is consciousness of guilt evidence. It's the reason why, if you've watched any Dateline ever and they introduce a 911 call, it's the reason why one of the first things that investigators will do is go back and listen to the 911 call. And how many times have we seen officers do that, right? They're trying to analyze the 911 call. Is this person guilty? Is this husband guilty of killing his wife? Or did he just show up and call 911 because he just found her like that, right? Let's keep going.
Okay, 34 Fairview.
34 Fairview, can't now, yes.
911 is on your order. Where's your emergency?
I don't know.
Hello?
Yes, I'm sorry. Can you come to 34 Fairview Road in Houston?
34 Fairview?
Yes, there's a man unresponsive in the snow.
There's the rehearsed statement. There's a man unresponsive in the snow.
Okay. What else?
He's gonna get here, okay?
Okay. What's going on? Is he face down?
We just flipped him over.
Okay. And who's that in the background? Is that someone?
Is he face down? So that's interesting. I because she's saying it, it seems like it's important. I would want to speak to Karen Reed to find out, was he face down? Was he on his back when they found him? How did she actually come upon him on the scene? And it might be in a body in the snow, and I'll go back and check to see if she talks about it. I think she might. I don't remember, but I would flag this, put a pin in this, because whatever she's saying, it's important to her, so it's important for us. Okay, note the way that she says his name. His name is John O'Keefe, like she's asking a question. So what she's doing is she's basically asking, do you know him? Like, she's afraid to say his name because she's afraid that the person on the other end is going to go, oh, like John O'Keefe, the cop? And she doesn't want to deal with that. And she's terrified to say it out loud, right? Because she realizes this is a police officer. And she hasn't mentioned that, by the way, on purpose, very, very intentionally, because from Jen McCabe's perspective, there's no upside to mentioning that he's a cop. There's no urgency. He's dead. So getting somebody there to save him more quickly is not a factor. But also, drawing attention to that, of course, makes it more urgent, inflames emotions of the dispatcher and the other cops as they show up on the scene. And she probably doesn't want that, right? You don't want a bunch of cops coming in heated, like, what happened to our fellow brother in blue? So you leave that out. Which, would I be surprised if Brian Albert told her to leave that out? Absolutely not.
Okay, how old is he?
John is 46 years old.
46. How long has he been outside?
I don't know. I don't know. He got out of the car and a couple of hours.
So think about this. I don't know. I don't know. But she's very conflicted, Jen McCabe, right here, right now, because she knows intellectually that she has to, toe the line, say all the right things. And she is, from the jump, controlling the narrative. I mean, this is her job now. From this point on, thanks to Karen Reed bringing her into this in the morning the way she did, Jen McCabe became the person that got to control the narrative from the start. Of course, not by any fault of Karen Reed's. It was completely, innocent. So Jen McCabe, first, she says, I don't know. And then she says, Well, he got out of the car. Okay, well, how do you know? I mean, I guess you could extrapolate that he got out of a car, but got out of a car and then she starts like he could have been here for a few hours. Okay, well, maybe, but put yourself in her shoes, okay? Really think about this. This is really important. So you just show up at your sister's house and there's a man who you were with last night whose girlfriend is in the car frantically looking for him. Okay. And you see him and it's probably a shock. Like, oh my God, she's right. He is here. What happened? You know, in your mind, you got a bunch of stuff racing through your head, but you really don't know. I mean, yes, okay, maybe there could be some inference, but you would be so shocked and in such a state of frenzy and panic, there would not be an ability to think clearly and in a level-headed way back through all of the sequences of events from the 6 hours before to say, well, it's probably the case that Karen Reed, you know, you just wouldn't be going through that exercise. It would just be, I don't know, just get somebody here now, right? So let's see what she does next.
Carrie, I don't know if he's breathing. There are two women trying to, it's in his body and they're hysterical.
I don't know if he's breathing. There's two women. She's stumbling through her words. She's saying it's critical. And then.
Okay, can you just try to ask him? I know it's tough, but we have to get the side apartment bill and I just got to know.
Okay. Is he breathing? It doesn't seem to be breathing.
Okay, do they know how to do CPR? Do they want to test CPR?
Yes, he's got to do CPR. No, I guess he's gone.
Okay. Now she says, I guess he's gone. This was an immediate flag to me before I went back and listened play by play to this call, because you have to understand, like, as human beings, and if you're someone who's ever been in a situation like this, you absolutely know the last thing in the world that you want to do is, before you've ever had some emergency professional come and work on your loved one or your friend or even a stranger that you just stumble upon on the street, the last thing that you're going to do is pronounce them dead. And, you know, Carrie Roberts, she doesn't even know. Jen doesn't even know Carrie Roberts. Karen Reed is not a first responder. So why would you assume that because Carrie Roberts reports he's not breathing, that he must be dead? I guess he's dead, right? So it's absurd. It's absurd. It's so telling that Jen McCabe would pronounce that he's dead without knowing that he's dead. She doesn't go near the body. Remember, she does not go near this body. She has gone right to the phone. She's the one that calls 911. That's her designation. Carrie and Karen go right for John. So she's had no contact with John's body, had no interaction with him whatsoever. And now she's going based on the opinion of a stranger, Carrie Roberts, a woman she doesn't even know. She doesn't know if that woman is trained in CPR. She doesn't know if she's even trained to take a pulse correctly. You're going to go based on her saying he's not breathing. Oh, I guess he's dead? Absolutely not. This is such a tell from Jennifer McCabe. But it doesn't stop here. And remember, everything inside of you as a human being you are built, your DNA directs you to not consider death. It directs you to avoid thinking about death. And if you don't have any real firsthand experience with anything tragic or traumatic or death at all, think about Dateline episodes that you've seen, people that go missing. And all of us are at home screaming, girlfriend, your sister's gone. She's been gone for like 6 months. But the loved ones still hold out hope. And you're like, how could you hold out hope? Like, they're gone, right? And they're saying things like, well, I just hope one day she's going to walk right back in the room, in the house. And we keep her room exactly the same way that it was when she left. And we're at home going, she's gone, So when you're in a situation like this, the last thing that you are doing is pronouncing this person who you just stumbled upon. You have no idea what happened to him. last thing you would do is just pronounce them dead, impromptu, number one. Number two, you were with him last night. You know he was drinking quite a bit. So the first thought in your head would be, he's passed out because he drank too much. He slipped, fell, maybe he drank too much. So of course, for you, it's going to be just get an emergency person here immediately. Now, this of course calls into question the most obvious point of all of this. All she had to do was go into the house and wake up her big brother, right? Uncle Brian. And she didn't do that. So not only did she not do that, she also does not press upon the dispatcher how important it is to get somebody there because this man is just drunk and passed out. She does the opposite. She says, I guess he's gone.
Okay, they don't feel comfortable doing so?
No, I think he's passed away.
And now she says it again. So the dispatch officer, being a good dispatch officer in this case, says, they don't feel comfortable doing CPR. And she ignores that and says, I think he's passed away. And it's like, no, Jen, he's passed away, is what she's really saying. What she's really saying is, he is passed away. I know he's gone. And that's really interesting. It's a really interesting moment here that Jennifer McCabe badly wants these people to understand that John is dead. That's really interesting to me because it would be the more incriminating path. So part of her absolutely wants to tell the truth. He's gone. And so she keeps saying it. And I'm not sure why that would be beneficial to her. I think it probably wasn't, but she couldn't help it in that moment. She couldn't help it. Now you have to also keep in mind, and this is something that comes up here. You have to put this whole scene in your mind. You're Jen McCabe. You're standing outside of your sister's front lawn. You know that John O'Keefe has now been dead for 6 hours. So these two women get to the scene. Karen Reed is lifting up her shirt, lifting up John's shirt and trying to warm him up. Right? So again, everybody's making the calculus that he must be alive and frozen on the lawn, which makes sense because of all the context clues, right? The snowstorm, they were out drinking. But if this happens in the middle of the summer, so you take away the weather, take away the snow, this man would obviously have been dead. He would have been obviously dead. He was cold, right? But because this happened in the middle of the winter, they were able to pass it off like it was hypothermia, right? Like house long to die in the cold, okay? So it's interesting to me that Jennifer McCabe is trying to communicate that he is actually dead. And she's watching Carrie and Karen touching him, laying on him, trying to resuscitate him with full knowledge, complete awareness that he has been dead for 6 hours and that they are jumping, touching, crawling all over a dead man. And if you start to notice like notes of shame in Jen McCabe's face, that would be an appropriate reaction to listening to this, because this 911 call is bringing up everything that Jen McCabe knows she is and tries to run from in almost every waking moment since this has happened within herself.
Okay. All right, we have the fire department and the police department on the way. If everyone's declining CPR, then I'll hang up with you, and if anything changes, you can give us a call back. Where are you guys outside?
I'm right up front of the car. I know, I'm on the phone with the ambulance. I know, honey. Carrie, you gotta get off of me. Carrie, you gotta get off of him.
So there's Jen saying, Carrie, you've got to get off of him, honey. Got to get off of him. Why would she need to get off of him? I mean, isn't the goal to give him CPR? But Jen McCabe is pronouncing him dead. That's what's happening right now. She's pronouncing him dead and she's telling Carrie, get off of him. And allegedly, according to Carrie and Jen, she hangs up the call and then Carrie requests that Jen come and do chest compressions for a minute. And when Jen is on the stand and recounting that, she talks about how hard it was to push down on the chest, essentially telling us again, he was dead. And she knew he was dead. She's telling us again in that testimony, he was gone. I knew he was gone.
You know if there was any alcohol or drugs involved?
He
Okay, so the dispatch officer asks, do you know if there was any alcohol or drugs involved? She says, they had been out. So again, this is distancing. She doesn't say we had all been out. Remember, this is her sister's front lawn. Sister, who she's close with. We have a very close family. So this is distancing. She's not saying we were all out. She's saying they were out. Like, I want no part of it. I don't know what happened. I wasn't there. I don't know. We don't know. Nobody knows. Only they know.
They've been out drinking?
Yes, like I'm talking hours about maybe, and I don't know how long he's been in this now.
Okay, is there any bleeding or anything? Maybe his head out?
Yes, possibly.
So he asks, is there any bleeding or did he hit his head on something? And she says, yes, and then starts talking about some bleeding in the face. So she is trying to steer the discussion away from the head wound. And why would that be? Why would you do that? Let's see. Let's see if there's another follow-up that helps us understand this better.
He's bleeding in the face.
Okay, bleeding from the face. All right.
Yes.
And how big's the pool of blood, if there is any?
Something's coming out the nose, and one of the women is doing CPR.
So this is interesting. He asks about a pool of blood, like there should be a pool of blood around him. And this is, of course, exactly why she's trying to get the attention away from the head wound, because Jen McCabe knows there is no pool of blood around him, that pool of blood is in the garage, right? She knows 100%. So she's trying to say, yeah, some blood on the face. And so she actually answers this in gibberish. She's like, and then CPR. They're giving him CPR. That's how she answers. It's an actual gibberish statement. Yeah. Unbelievable, right? It's unbelievable.
Okay, one of them is doing CPR?
Yes, I'm working on him.
All right, if you want CPR, and just give us a call back if you tell us response, all right? But we're on the way.
Look at that face. This is the face of evil right there. And you know, the truth is that looks like a face of anguish, and it better be, because how dare you sit across from Karen Reed in that courtroom? This is evil. This is the kind of thing that not only ruins your life, but you have 4 children, 4 daughters. And you have the nerve to complain that Turtle Boy has brought suffering to your life. Of course, we also know that the first call that she makes after Karen Reed calls Jen McCabe in a panic looking for John, she calls her sister, 507, and says, of course, we're on our way. Lock it down. We're on our way. And from that second on, she begins to control the narrative. She tries immediately. First thing she does is try to keep Carrie Roberts close so that Carrie is overwhelmingly influenced by Jen McCabe's version of events. Spends hours collectively on the phone with Carrie Roberts the following day. On January 29th, makes countless phone calls to Carrie Roberts to control the narrative, and then they make their timeline. And it works. She's telling them everything. Tell him the guy never went in the house.
And then the FBI lab in Quantico, Virginia, searched Jen McCabe's phone. And this is the other part. At 2:27, long before John was found, and after she got home to her residence, she Googled how long to die in the cold.
And let's review the Google search. Now, this is a big topic. And there are two different elements to this topic. There's the Jennifer McCabe part, and then there's the Ian Whiffen, Jessica Hyde, Richard Green part. But for right now, I want to focus on Jen McCabe. Because of the fact that the medical examiners ruled hypothermia contributed to John's death incorrectly. That is the critical piece of misinformation that misled everyone, that misled Joseph Krosky into believing that couldn't possibly be the Alberts that would have done this, that there was no motive on the part of the people in the house, that misled everyone, Because the implication if he dies of hypothermia is what? Is that he was left outside to die in the cold. But he wasn't. He was dead. And Jennifer McCabe knows it. So why is she Googling how long to die in the cold? Wait till you see this, you guys. You're going to freak out. It's nuts. This is nuts. What I'm about to show you is nuts. They decide, Brian Albert decides that the story that they're going to go with is hypothermia. Because if, let's say, the guy never came into the house, so there's only like two things you need to know. The guy never came in the house. We'll make it look like either he just fell and hit his head, or maybe he got hit by Lucky's plow. Now, these people know Lucky Loughran. They've known him their whole life. They know he's a little, slow, a little off. Whatever phrase you want to use. So they think, well, we'll put him outside and maybe they'll infer that he either died of hypothermia because he fell or he was hit by Lucky's plow. At that point, Karen Reed is a non-factor, right? Nobody is thinking about Karen Reed. If Karen Reed is not Karen Reed, if she's somebody else and doesn't insert herself by accident directly in the middle of this by contacting Jennifer McCabe and then having a cracked taillight and then saying, could I have hit him? If none of that happens, Karen Reed is not ever brought into this. She's just not. And there was no intention to bring her into this. They were perfectly content with, we don't know what happened. John must have fallen when he got out of Karen's car. We don't know. He never came in the house. So Brian Albert comes up with the story. He never came in the house. Maybe he died of hypothermia. We don't know. So what does Jennifer McCabe do in her infinite wisdom? She Googles hypothermia. How long does it take to die in the cold? To try to see whether or not that would be a viable excuse for what happened to John O'Keefe. How viable is that excuse? And because, and think of it this way, you have two very well-trained first responders in Brian Albert and Brian Higgins. Brian Higgins, who we learn is a tactical medic. So he would have been trained to help resuscitate men on the front lines in the military who are wounded in battle, right? So you think these guys wouldn't have known that a body, whether that body's temperature drops because it's a dead body or because it's dying of hypothermia, they would both know that with hypothermia in particular, that cannot be called, that person cannot be determined to be deceased until or unless the body temperature is brought back to normal, because there are all of these different instances where people unfreeze and can be brought back to life even after they've been dead for pretty long periods of time. There are people that have been underwater for an hour, frozen, and come back to life. If you don't believe me, look it up. That's the reason why universally first responders know if somebody is suspected of freezing, being hypothermic, you can't pronounce them deceased until they warm them up. And these people in the house would have known that. And that is what ultimately saved their behinds. If this happens in the middle of the summer, they are toast, because there would have been no question that a body that was no longer at the right temperature was dead body, was a dead body, was not hypothermic, was dead. But the medical examiner was influenced by the circumstances. And you guys, this is exactly what Hank Brennan wants this jury to do. This is what confirmation bias is. If nothing else, what this trial is highlighting is the difference between science, actual science, and the way science works, and inference, speculation, and exactly how confirmation bias happens. When you start with a whole bit of context, with all of this information about the circumstances in your head, which is the reason why when the feds hired ARCA, they didn't give them the complete picture. They gave them pieces because they didn't want all of that noise to be in their heads when they were trying to determine what happened. But the medical examiner couldn't help it. Medical examiner had all of that context. They had been at the bar. They were out drinking. They pull up at 34 Fairview. Karen Reed is hysterical. Jen McCabe saying John O'Keefe must have been outside for 4 hours. Must have fallen. And if you have all of that in your head and you're looking at this body and you're registering the temperature of that body and you can't suss out, it's impossible in your mind at that time. You're knee deep in it. You got the cops putting all kinds of pressure on you to say it was a car accident. Of course, she couldn't determine what it was, and she knows it. And when you listen to her testimony, she's a little shaky on whether it was hypothermia. She's very unsure, which is the reason why she sends the brain to Dr. Stonebridge. That was not just common procedure. She sends it to her to figure out what the hell happened because she's not sure. And she, of course, knows it's not a car accident, but she's not sure what it is. So she leaves it undetermined, which was definitely the right move. But because of that, the people in the house get away with murder. They get away with murder. But don't worry, because we have way more evidence to show you. So you don't even have to take my word for it. You can figure it out for yourself. So let's keep going. Let's hear from Jennifer McCabe herself about the Google search. Now, to do this, let me introduce you to Sergio Denaro. Sergio Denaro just so happened to start his Truth Revealed YouTube channel a year ago, right before the Karen Read first trial starts. And luckily for us, this is a man with a very specific, unique skill set, but beyond just the skill set, he is brilliant at it. Probably, if we're being honest with ourselves, among the best that there is in this particular ability to interrogate, to get at the truth. So, if you don't know about him, this will be fun. And if you do, it's your lucky day, because I have sorted through a lot of the testimony already so that you don't have to do that footwork. So let's hear what Sergio Denaro has to say about Jennifer McCabe's infamous 227 Google search. Okay, I'm not going to play this whole testimony to you. It's long, but I'm only going to play a part. Now, if you're not familiar with this technique, in order to make these determinations, you have to do what's called a baseline. You cannot just take somebody in the middle of what they're saying, in the middle of their testimony or interrogation, and infer anything. You have to first spend a great deal of time, at least like a half hour, to get their baseline, how they normally speak and normally respond to questions when they're telling the truth and they're just answering straightforward. So I want you just to trust me here. And if you don't believe me, you can go back and look for yourself, that he has already done that sufficiently, actually for 4 videos. So we're way, way past baseline. And that is the reason why he's able to be so definitive in his analysis here. And again, if you don't believe me, you can go see for yourself. But the cool thing about this, and the reason why I'm showing you this part, is because we get to go test his theory. We get to go look for evidence of whether or not he's right. So here we go.
Before, but this entire lead up is to the 623. And she says, again, I'm not sure about the exact times, just Karen asked me to do it. So again, we're still right inside of her head here, which is right where we want to be. And you're aware, Ms. McCabe, that both spellings of that phrase result in the exact same search results, don't they? I'm not aware of that. That is really, really interesting. I'm going to highlight that in green. So she says, that's contracted. I'm not aware of that. No, this is a true statement. So now we have to ask why. It almost throws me off to see a true statement from her. So we don't want to ignore that. So he says, you're aware that both spellings create the exact same search results. And if she's not aware of that, it means that she didn't look at the results. So why would she not look at the results? I think I know, but let's move along. Well, you Googled them, ma'am. You looked at your phone, you Googled Haas long to die in cold and how long T-I die in C-I-K-D. You Googled them, right? I did, yes. Again, truthful, I did, yes. She doesn't really have any problem admitting to that. And they result in the exact same search results, don't they? I have no idea. Again, this is truthful. I have no idea. It's in response to the same question. So again, we got to ask why? Why does she not know the results of what she was Googling? It's because she didn't care. She was Googling it for a different reason. So my question to you is, why the 2 searches? Let me think about that. Okay, she was standing next to me screaming, shaking my hand. My hand was cold. I was trying to Google it. Obviously, maybe. Whatever came up first didn't make sense because I had some misspellings, so I did it again. This is a completely rehearsed statement. The only part that came out that wasn't rehearsed was obviously, maybe. These are opposite statements. Obviously, whatever came up. Maybe whatever came up. Those are opposite statements. Obviously is the opposite of maybe. And so you do not see opposite statements that come out from a memory because the memory simply presents. You might have perceived something wrong, but however you perceive it is exactly how you're going to pull that memory. So in your mind, in your memory, this is either going to be obviously or it's not obvious, in which case you would say, maybe it was for this reason. But when she says obviously maybe, it means that she's making it up, and in her made up version, she wants to say obviously, but then after she says it, she realizes that doesn't fit with my story very well. So she changes it to obviously maybe. So this lots long way of saying this is an indicator of deception here. Whatever came up first didn't make sense. So this is a negative statement followed by a explanatory statement. And that means this is a lie. So now we have a second indicator that this is a lie because it had some misspellings. So now this is a neg X. Here we have another explanatory statement. We have a negative statement and then two explanatory statements. So what does this mean? It means that she started out with a rehearsed statement and then she made a mess out of it. She tried to add to her rehearsed statement. And when she did, she just made a jumble out of it. And you remember from the videos before, anytime she tries to deviate from her rehearsed statements, they just come out as word salad. It's like just a jumble. She threw herself off with this obviously maybe comment. And then she gets super sensitive about it and gives you, this is a negative with two explanatory statements. So all of that completely fabricated. Now this is where stuff starts to get interesting. If you're still with me up to this point, this is where you get all the payoff. So how long to die in cold result in articles concerning time of exposure. And she says, we never got the chance to read it. So now she has to admit that she didn't read the articles, that she didn't even see the articles. It's not that she didn't get the chance to read it. It's that she didn't read it. And this is her excuse for not reading it, hence the word never. But that doesn't surprise me. The word never got a chance to read it. She had a chance to read it. She just didn't want to read it. But this is what's important here. This use of the word we. She does not see Karen Reed as a friend. So for her to say the word we here, this is wildly and crazily out of place. In my mind, this is just screaming there's not just deception, but there's a big problem here that needs to be looked at. My note here is that she wasn't with Karen when this happened. And you see, even Mr. Jackson picks up on this. He says, well, you're the one who's, wait, when you say we, who's we? Because it even stands out to him. So I don't think she was with Karen here. If I had any say in any of this, I would go back and review the GPS from everyone's phones. I would look at pictures, videos, and try to determine who Jennifer McCabe was actually standing next to at 6:23, 6:24 a.m. Because that is going to tell you a lot. I never would have thought to look for who she's standing next to when she's doing this, these text messages. But that we indicates that she's not standing next to Karen. So she's colluding. That's what I'm getting at. At this point, she is working with somebody to try and fix the mistake on her part of Googling at 2:27 in the morning how long it takes to die from exposure. Someone is standing next to her right here trying to help her cover that up. So,
all right. So what do you think? You think that somebody might be standing next to her? So if she's colluding at 6:23 that morning, whoever she's colluding with would be with her. So why don't we check to see who she's with at 6:23? We go. There's Jennifer McCabe controlling the narrative, telling everybody what's going on. At 6:23 a.m., look at where Jennifer McCabe is and what she is doing. She calls Brian Albert. And let's play this all the way through. And thank you to Microdots. God, can we thank Microdots enough for the work that they do? I mean, you just can't say enough about Microdots for cleaning up all this video and just being so ahead of the game. And just thank you to you guys for everything you do. Watch this.
Now, my belief is he had a black book. Hey, listen, all cops keep a book, right? Especially if you're corrupt.
What is the book?
The book basically is, okay, on such and such a date, I did a favor for this high-end official. On such and such a date, I used specialized equipment that I shouldn't have used to wiretap a person for a political whatever. Right?
Yeah, gotcha. Okay.
You know what I'm saying? So
yeah.
My theory is that after this thing went down and it's the oh shit moment that they can't get out of, he made a phone call to someone to say, if I go down, we're all going down. So somehow the wheels were put in motion between 1 o'clock and 6 o'clock. Enough calls were made. And I believe that's really how the FBI got involved, because I believe they were already on either a public corruption case or another investigation in that area. Because let's face it, Gavin, the feds don't investigate hit and runs.
God save the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross out the ones who heard my cries and watched me weep.